The millionaire went up in silence and stopped upon hearing the song. The nurse was gently singing to his sleeping son. He had never heard such sweetness in such a simple voice. In that moment, her life and his changed forever. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. The hallway of St. Cross Hospital was bustling that Monday morning. Doctors and nurses moved hurriedly between rooms, in the pediatric wing carrying clipboards and equipment. In room 304, Ethan remained seated in his wheelchair, his gaze fixed on the window overlooking the hospital garden. His small fingers lightly gripped the arm of the chair, while the morning sun touched his pale face through the glass. Robert Mitchell, his father, observed his son from a distance, leaning against the doorframe. Wearing an impeccable Armani suit, he held a coffee cup that had gone cold long ago. His austere countenance didn't reveal the storm of emotions consuming him inside. 2 years had passed since the accident that changed their lives forever, and with each passing day, he felt his son growing more distant, sinking into a private world he couldn't access. The businessman checked his gold Rolex. He was late for an important meeting with foreign investors. His luxury hotel chain was expanding, and commitments were multiplying. But how could he leave and abandon his son there, so alone? Guilt gnawed at him, even knowing that Ethan was surrounded by the best professionals money could buy. Dr. Franklin, the neurologist in charge of the case, approached with soft footsteps. "Mr. Mitchell, can we talk for a moment?" Robert nodded, following the doctor to his office. The walls were decorated with impressive diplomas from renowned universities, but none of those titles had managed to bring his son back. "Mr. Mitchell, I know you've invested heavily in Ethan's treatment, but we need to consider new approaches. Conventional methods aren't having the expected effect," the doctor began, adjusting his gold-framed glasses. "We've hired a new nurse for the team, Hannah Sullivan. She has a different methodology for treating traumatized children." Robert frowned, suspicious. "Different how, doctor? We've tried every kind of alternative therapy." His voice carried the weariness of countless frustrated attempts. "Hannah works with music and art therapy. She's achieved impressive results. In other similar cases," explained the doctor, extending a folder with the nurse's resume. Robert flipped through the documents without much interest. Diplomas from public universities, experience in small hospitals, nothing that particularly impressed him. At that very moment, outside the office, a 32-year-old woman walked down the corridor. Hannah Sullivan carried a simple fabric bag, from which the tip of a handmade cloth doll could be seen. Her steps were firm but gentle, as if respecting the necessary silence of a hospital environment. Her brown eyes conveyed a serenity that contrasted with the tense atmosphere of the place. As she passed by room 304, Hannah paused for a moment. She observed the boy through the glass, noticing how his eyes seemed to search for something beyond the visible horizon. Without knowing it, she was about to begin a journey that would change not only Ethan's life, but also her own and Robert's. Dr. Franklin continued his explanation. "Mr. Mitchell, I know you're accustomed to renowned professionals, but I ask that you give this new approach a chance. Sometimes it's in simplicity that we find the deepest answers." Robert sighed, running his hand through the gray hair at his temples. The weight of responsibility and loneliness made him appear older than his 42 years. His mind returned to that fateful morning 2 years ago, the phone call, the rush to the hospital, the world collapsing in a matter of minutes. Since then, he had been living on autopilot, dividing himself between corporate meetings and hospital visits without really being present in either place. "All right, doctor, you can try," he finally agreed, more from exhaustion than conviction. "But I want daily reports on any progress or regression." Meanwhile, Hannah organized her materials in the nurse's room. Among her things was a small diary, where she noted her observations about each patient. On the first blank page, she wrote in her delicate handwriting, "Ethan Mitchell, 6 years old. Physical diagnosis, paraplegia. Emotional diagnosis, yet to be discovered." Hannah adjusted her badge in the pocket of her white coat and took a deep breath before entering room 304. It was her first official day as Ethan's nurse, and she knew the first moments would be crucial. With soft steps, she approached the wheelchair, where the boy remained motionless, still contemplating the window. "Good morning, Ethan," she said in a serene voice, not expecting a response. She sat in a nearby chair, maintaining a respectful distance. From her bag, she took out the cloth doll that her grandmother had made especially for this occasion. It was a simple little doll wearing blue overalls, with wool hair and a smile embroidered with red thread. "This is Tommy," she introduced, placing the doll on the support table. "You know, Ethan, Tommy can't walk either, but he loves music. In fact, he's the best listener I've ever known." Hannah smiled, beginning to softly hum an old melody that her grandmother used to sing. Outside the room, Robert had returned from his meeting earlier than usual. Something compelled him to be there, even if he couldn't explain what. He stopped by the door, observing the interaction through the glass. His expression showed a mixture of skepticism and contained hope. Hannah continued her routine, checking Ethan's vital signs and making necessary notes, always conversing naturally, as if the boy's silence was just a pause in an ongoing dialogue. "Did you know Tommy has a story for every song he knows? Today he told me about a butterfly that danced in the garden." It was then that something subtle, almost imperceptible, happened. Ethan's fingers, previously rigid on the arm of the chair, moved slightly toward the doll. Hannah noticed but didn't make a fuss. She continued humming while organizing the morning medications. Robert, still in the hallway, felt his heart race. It was the first spontaneous movement he had seen his son make in weeks. He wanted to enter the room, but something held him back. Perhaps it was the fear of breaking that fragile moment, or perhaps the awareness that, for the first time, someone was managing to cross the invisible barrier that Ethan had built around himself. Hannah picked up the doll and placed it gently in Ethan's lap. "Tommy sometimes gets tired of sitting. He likes when someone holds him a little," she explained naturally. To her surprise, Ethan didn't reject the doll. His small fingers lightly touched the soft fabric of the blue overalls. From the hallway, Robert observed the scene with a lump in his throat. That simple nurse, with her unconventional methods, was achieving something that the most renowned specialists had not. For the first time in a long time, he felt a pang of genuine hope. Hannah continued her work, now singing another soft melody while changing the bed sheets. Her movements were fluid and calm, as if dancing a silent waltz around the room. The cure environment, previously charged with a heavy atmosphere, began to gain an almost imperceptible lightness. "You know, Ethan," she continued while fluffing the pillows, "Tommy told me this room has the best view of the garden. He loved seeing the birds outside. Have you noticed the yellow flowers that grew near the bench?" It was at that moment that Robert noticed something extraordinary. Ethan's eyes, previously fixed on a distant point, had moved slightly toward the window, as if he really wanted to see the flowers Hannah mentioned. It was a tiny movement, but full of meaning. Hannah finished her morning procedures with the same calmness with which she had begun. "Now I need to visit other friends," she said, preparing to leave. "Can Tommy stay with you until tomorrow? He told me he'd love to hear more stories." To Robert's astonishment, Ethan clutched the doll slightly to his chest, a gesture so subtle it could have gone unnoticed by less attentive eyes. Hannah smiled, as if that small victory was exactly what she had expected. In the Mitchell mansion, Robert paced restlessly through the office decorated with classic furniture and valuable artwork. The meeting with shareholders had ended hours ago, but he remained there, mentally reliving the scene he had witnessed at the hospital. The subtle gesture of Ethan toward the cloth doll wouldn't leave his mind. His eyes fell on a photograph on the shelf. Ethan at 4 years old, smiling broadly while playing in the garden with his mother, Claire. The image captured a moment of pure happiness, so distant from the current reality that it seemed to belong to another life. Claire, with her brown hair in the wind and bright eyes, emanated a contagious joy that had always been able to illuminate any environment. "Mr. Mitchell." The voice of Rose, the housekeeper who had worked with the family for 15 years, interrupted his thoughts. "Dinner is served." Robert checked the clock, 9:30 p.m. He had lost track of time again. "You can put it away, Rose. I'm not hungry." The housekeeper hesitated at the door, her hands anxiously squeezing her apron. "You need to eat, sir. It's been 2 days since you've barely touched your food." Her voice carried the maternal tone of someone who deeply knew the habits of the house and its residents. Upstairs, Ethan's room remained untouched, exactly as it was on the morning of the accident. Toys organized on shelves, airplane wallpaper, the collection of toy cars he loved so much. Rose kept everything impeccably clean, as if at any moment the boy might come running back to play. Robert climbed the stairs, his footsteps echoing through the silent house. He stopped in front of his son's door and, after a moment of hesitation, entered. The subtle scent of lavender, the same perfume that Claire used, still lingered in the air thanks to the sachets that Rose insisted on keeping in the drawers. He sat in the small armchair next to the bed, the one where Claire used to read stories to Ethan before bedtime. He closed his eyes and for a moment could clearly hear her voice singing lullabies, the crystalline laughter of Ethan echoing through the corridors. "Mr. Mitchell?" Rose called again, this time with a cup of tea on a tray. "I brought some chamomile tea. It helps calm you down." Robert accepted the cup, more for the gesture of affection than for the drink itself. "Rose, do you remember the songs Claire used to sing to Ethan?" The housekeeper smiled, her eyes slightly watering. "How could I forget? Mrs. Claire had such a beautiful voice. The boy always asked for the one about the bluebird." The businessman nodded, remembering the melody that his wife had created especially for their son. It was a simple song about a bird that traveled the world, bringing joy to people. Ethan used to clap along to the rhythm, his little eyes shining with enchantment. "Today," began Robert, his voice softer than usual, "I saw something different at the hospital. A new nurse. She sang to Ethan, and he reacted, Rose. It was something very small, but..." The housekeeper sat on the edge of the bed, something she would never do under normal circumstances. "Sometimes, Mr. Mitchell, it's the small things that make the biggest difference." Mrs. Claire always said that. Robert stood up and walked to the window. The garden, once so full of life and colors, Claire loved flowers, was now meticulously trimmed, but without the same vibration. Like the house, like his life, like Ethan, everything seemed to exist only on the surface, without the essence that used to overflow. "I need to do something, Rose," he said, more to himself than to the housekeeper. "I can't continue just watching my son disappear a little more each day." Rose stood up, straightening her uniform. "You're already doing it, Mr. Mitchell. You're allowing different people to try to help. Mrs. Claire would be proud." That night, for the first time in a long time, Robert didn't work until dawn. After Rose retired, he remained in Ethan's room, going through old photo albums. In one of them, he found an image he had forgotten. Claire, pregnant, singing karaoke at a family party. Her smile was radiant, hands resting on her belly while singing a love song. The memory hit him like a wave. Claire always said that music had the power to heal the soul. "When words fail," she used to say, "the melody speaks directly to the heart." Perhaps, thought Robert, that new nurse with her cloth doll and simple songs had discovered the path that all the specialists had ignored. The next morning, Hannah arrived earlier at the hospital. She carried a small antique music box, a gift from her grandmother, along with her usual notes. Upon entering room 304, she found Ethan still sleeping, the Tommy doll nestled in his small arms. Dr. Franklin intercepted her in the hallway before she could begin her procedures. "Hannah, I need to warn you. Mr. Mitchell is a very influential man and extremely protective of his son. Several professionals have already tried different approaches and been dismissed." Hannah adjusted the music box in her hands, smiling serenely. "Doctor, I'm not here to impress anyone. I'm here for Ethan." Inside the room, Ethan was beginning to wake up. His eyes, normally distant, focused immediately on the doll he was still holding. Hannah observed this small gesture with attention. It was the first time the boy had shown recognition for something in his immediate environment. "Good morning, Ethan," she whispered, approaching softly. "I see you and Tommy had a good night." She began her morning routine, checking vital signs while humming softly. The music box rested on the support table, still closed. Robert arrived at the hospital at that moment, stopping at the door as was his custom. This time, however, something was different. He carried an old folder which Hannah noticed contained partially visible photographs. "Mr. Mitchell," she greeted, maintaining a soft tone so as not to break the tranquil atmosphere of the room. "Would you like to come in? Tommy was just saying he'd love to meet more people who enjoy music." Robert hesitated for a moment, his rigid posture contrasting with Hannah's naturalness. Finally, he took a step into the room. "Good morning," he said, his voice hoarser than normal. I brought some things that I thought might help." Hannah perceived the vulnerability behind that business facade. With delicacy, she indicated a chair near Ethan's. "I'm sure Ethan would love to see what you brought." Robert sat down, carefully opening the folder. Ethan, still holding Tommy, moved his head slightly toward his father, another small progress that didn't go unnoticed by Hannah. "These are old photos," explained Robert, his voice trembling slightly, "from the time when his mother used to sing to him." Hannah approached with genuine interest, recognizing the precious opportunity that presented itself. What a special moment to share. "You know, Ethan, Tommy also loves stories about families and special songs." It was then that Hannah opened her music box. A soft, crystalline melody filled the environment, creating an invisible bridge between past and present. Ethan's eyes, for the first time, focused directly on something. The photograph his father was holding where Claire smiled, singing at a party. Robert felt his throat tighten. That look, the first truly conscious look from his son in so long, was like a ray of sunshine breaking through thick clouds. Hannah maintained a respectful silence, just letting the music from the box accompany that precious moment. "She used to sing this song," murmured Robert almost inaudibly. "It was his favorite," Hannah observed as Ethan's small hand moved toward the photograph, still holding Tommy with his other arm. It wasn't just a reflex movement. There was intention. There was connection. The boy was finally beginning to reconnect with his world. "Sometimes," said Hannah softly, "music helps us keep the most special moments in here." She lightly touched her own heart. "And when we play those songs again, it's as if we can relive those moments, isn't it, Ethan?" To Robert's amazement, a single tear ran down his son's face. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of recognition, as if, for the first time in 2 years, Ethan allowed himself to feel, to remember, to exist beyond the silence he had built around himself. The following weeks brought a subtle but noticeable change to the routine at St. Cross Hospital. Room 304, previously immersed in a heavy silence, now daily received the soft chords of Hannah's songs. The nurse had transformed each medical procedure into a small musical presentation, always accompanied by faithful Tommy, the doll that never left Ethan's lap. On a particularly sunny afternoon, Hannah arrived at the room carrying something different, a small electronic keyboard. "Look what Tommy brought today, Ethan," she announced, positioning the instrument on the support table. "He said you can play the keys while we do the exercises." Ethan's face, previously always expressionless, showed a glimmer of interest. His fingers, which until then only moved to hold Tommy, extended hesitantly toward the black and white keys. Robert, who now spent more time at the hospital and less in his office, observed the scene with a mixture of hope and anxiety. He had cancelled 3 important meetings that week, something unthinkable a few months ago. His phone constantly vibrated with messages from executives at his hotel chain, but for the first time in years, the demands of work seemed secondary. "Mr. Mitchell," Hannah called softly, "why don't you join us? Tommy told me you know some special songs." Robert adjusted his tie, uncomfortable. Music had always been Claire's territory, not his. He was the man of numbers, strategies, business. But something in Ethan's expectant look made him take a step forward. "I don't know how to play," he admitted, sitting next to his son. "Your mother was the one who had that gift." Hannah smiled, her eyes conveying understanding. "Sometimes, we don't need to know how to play to make music. We can start by just feeling." She guided Ethan's hand to a piano key, producing a crystalline note that echoed through the room. To everyone's surprise, Ethan pressed the key again, on his own. The sound seemed to awaken something within him, a dormant memory perhaps. His eyes, previously empty, gained a gleam of curiosity. "That's right, dear," encouraged Hannah while positioning Tommy so that he also observed the keyboard. "Each key has its own voice, just like each of us." Robert watched, amazed, as his son timidly explored the keys of the instrument. He remembered how Claire used to sit at the piano in the living room, baby Ethan in her lap, filling the house with melodies that seemed to dance in the air. "She used to play a song," murmured Robert, almost not realizing he was speaking aloud. "Something about a bird." Hannah caught the cue immediately. With skilled fingers, she began to play a soft melody on the keyboard. "Would it be something like this?" The businessman widened his eyes. "How did you—" "Mothers have a special way of creating songs for their children," explained Hannah, continuing to play. "My grandmother always said that these songs are like fingerprints of the heart, unique and eternal." Ethan, still pressing random keys, stopped for a moment. His eyes focused on the movement of Hannah's fingers over the keyboard. It was the longest period he had maintained his attention on something since the accident. "Mr. Mitchell," Hannah called softly, "why don't you tell Ethan about the day that song was created? Tommy would love to hear that story." Robert swallowed hard, long repressed memories coming to the surface. It was the day you were born, son," he began, his voice gradually gaining strength. "Your mother was in the maternity ward. You were so small. She looked out the window and saw a blue bird on the ledge. She said it was a sign that you would be free and happy like that bird." As he spoke, Hannah continued playing softly, creating a soundtrack for the shared memories. Ethan, still holding Tommy with one arm, used his other hand to touch one key, then another, as if trying to accompany the melody. "From that day on," continued Robert, his voice choked, "she sang that song to you every night. She said that as long as there was music in the world, there would be hope and love." It was then that something extraordinary happened. Ethan, for the first time in 2 years, made a sound. It wasn't exactly a word, but a soft murmur that accompanied the melody. Hannah kept the music flowing, but her hands trembled slightly with emotion. Robert covered his face with his hands, silent tears streaming between his fingers. The news of Ethan's progress spread quickly through the corridors of St. Cross Hospital. Dr. Franklin couldn't hide his amazement as he reviewed Hannah's notes, which meticulously documented each small achievement: the first sound, the interest in the keyboard, the more focused looks. "It's really impressive," the doctor commented during a meeting with his team. "In just a few weeks, Hannah has achieved more progress than all the specialists in the last 2 years. However, not everyone shared the same enthusiasm. Dr. Marcus Silver, the administrative director of the hospital, observed the situation with growing concern. "We need to maintain professionalism," he argued, meticulously adjusting his glasses. "This unconventional approach can create dangerous precedents." Meanwhile, in room 304, Hannah introduced a new activity. She had brought colorful paints and brushes, transforming the physical therapy session into an artistic experience. "Let's paint while we do the exercises, Ethan." Tommy said he loves to see colors dancing on paper. Ethan, still faithfully holding his doll, showed interest in the vibrant paints. His fingers, previously reluctant to make any movement, now extended curiously toward the brushes. Robert arrived during the improvised session, carrying his usual document folder, but also something new, a small portable radio. He stopped at the door, observing his son dip a brush in blue paint, leaving marks on the paper while Hannah softly hummed. "Mr. Mitchell," exclaimed Hannah with genuine joy, "you arrived just in time. We're creating our first work of art, aren't we, Ethan?" The businessman approached, noticing how his son seemed more present, more connected with his surroundings. The paper in front of him was covered with blue spots that somehow resembled birds in flight. "I brought something," said Robert, placing the radio on the table. "I found some old tapes with the songs that Claire recorded." Hannah immediately perceived the importance of that moment. "What a special gift. What do you think, Ethan? Can we paint while we listen to Mom's voice?" The boy raised his eyes from the paper for the first time, focusing on the radio. Robert, with slightly trembling hands, inserted one of the tapes and pressed play. Claire's crystalline voice filled the environment, singing the blue bird song. It was at that moment that something extraordinary happened. Ethan, still holding Tommy with one arm, extended his other hand toward his father. It was a simple gesture, but full of meaning, the first contact he had initiated since the accident. Robert froze, fearing that any sudden movement might break that precious moment. Hannah, with her characteristic sensitivity, continued painting calmly, as if that scene were the most natural thing in the world. "You know, Tommy," she said, addressing the doll but speaking to everyone in the room, "sometimes the most important words are those we don't need to say out loud." The businessman finally moved, gently holding his son's hand. His eyes met Hannah's, overflowing with silent gratitude. The nurse just smiled, continuing to guide Ethan's brush over the paper, while Claire's voice filled the empty spaces with her melody. In the hallway, Dr. Marcus passed by with his clipboard, observing the scene through the window, his brow furrowed, as he saw the closeness between the nurse and the Mitchell family. In his hands, a newly drafted memo expressed concerns about inappropriate professional conduct. But for now, that document remained in his folder, while inside the room a family slowly began to reconnect through music, art, and the unconditional love of a mother who, even in her absence, could still touch their hearts. Dr. Marcus Silver's office was impeccably organized, with each object in its proper place. The administrative director of St. Cross Hospital observed through his panoramic window the movement in the parking lot where Robert Mitchell had just parked his black Porsche. "Doctor, the board meeting will begin in 5 minutes, announced his secretary through the intercom. Marcus adjusted his Italian tie and organized a folder full of documents. Among them were various records of Hannah's unconventional sessions, photographs of the businessman frequenting the hospital outside visiting hours, and a complete dossier on the nurse's professional history. In the meeting room, the hospital, board members were already waiting. Dr. Franklin was present, anxiously flipping through some notes about Ethan's progress. The atmosphere was one of veiled tension. "Gentlemen," began Marcus, his voice calculatedly controlled, "I called this meeting to discuss a concerning situation in the pediatric ward. We have a professional who is exceeding various ethical and protocol boundaries." Meanwhile, in room 304, Hannah was developing a new activity with Ethan. She had brought a small sensory garden with different textures and aromas. The boy, still inseparable from Tommy, curiously explored the plants with his free hand. "Look, Ethan," explained Hannah, guiding his fingers over a lavender leaf. "This is Rose's favorite flower, your housekeeper. She told me your mother loved to have vases of them around the house." The boy's eyes, once so distant, now focused on the small purple flowers. His face showed an expression of recognition, the familiar aroma awakening dormant memories. Robert, who was observing the scene, from the door felt his cell phone vibrate. It was a message from his assistant. "Emergency meeting at the hospital board. Dr. Marcus requesting your urgent presence." "Hannah," he called, his voice tense, "I need to resolve something. Would you stay with Ethan a little longer?" The nurse noticed the concern in his tone. "Of course, Mr. Mitchell. Ethan and I still have a lot to explore in our garden, don't we?" In the hallway, Robert met Dr. Franklin, who was waiting for him with a grave expression. "Mr. Mitchell, I need to alert you. The board is questioning Hannah's methods. Dr. Marcus has compiled a dossier." "What kind of dossier?" interrupted Robert, his business posture instantly emerging. "Allegations of inappropriate conduct, excessive closeness with the family, non-protocol procedures," explained the doctor, visibly uncomfortable. Inside the meeting room, Marcus was projecting images of Hannah's sessions. "As you can see, gentlemen, this nurse has transformed a hospital room into a kind of music and art room. This violates various safety and hygiene protocols." It was at that moment that Robert entered the room, his imposing presence momentarily silencing all those present. "Interesting," he said, his voice sharp as ice. "To discuss the methods that are bringing my son back to life without even consulting me." Marcus adjusted his glasses, maintaining his composure. Mr. Mitchell, I understand your emotional involvement, but as an institution, we have protocols to follow. Protocols? Robert laughed without humor. The same protocols that kept my son silent for 2 years? In room 304, oblivious to the brewing storm, Hannah continued her session with Ethan. She had begun to sing softly while organizing the plants in the sensory garden, and to her surprise, the boy began to slightly sway his head to the rhythm of the music. "Look, Tommy," she said to the doll, "it seems we have a new musician in the family." Ethan, for the first time, sketched something close to a smile. It was at that exact moment that Dr. Marcus appeared at the door, accompanied by 2 board members. His cold gaze swept the room, stopping at the scattered plants, the musical keyboard in the corner, the colorful drawings on the walls. "Miss Sullivan," his voice was cutting, "I need you to accompany me to my office immediately." Hannah felt her heart tighten as she saw Ethan's expression change, the small smile disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. "Now is not a good time, Dr. Marcus. We're in the middle of an important session." "This wasn't a request, miss. It was an order." The silence in Dr. Marcus's office was heavy as lead. Hannah was seated in front of his imposing desk, her hands resting serenely on her lap. Through the window, she could hear the distant sound of an ambulance. "Miss Sullivan," he began, flipping through a folder, "your record indicates training at a public university, experience in small rural hospitals, so nothing that justifies the unorthodox methods you've been applying in such a delicate case." Hannah maintained her composure. "Dr. Marcus, I respect your position, but my methods have a scientific basis. Art therapy and music therapy are recognized worldwide." "What is recognized," he interrupted, "are established protocols, not improvisations with cloth dolls and gardens inside hospital rooms." In the hallway, Robert paced back and forth, his phone pressed against his ear. "Paul, I need you to look up everything about the hospital's policies, contracts, anything that gives us leverage in this situation." "Doctor." Franklin approached hesitantly. "Mr. Mitchell, perhaps we should consider a less confrontational approach." "Less confrontational?" Robert turned abruptly. "My son smiled today, Doctor. For the first time in 2 years, he smiled." In room 304, Ethan remained seated in his chair, clutching Tommy to his chest. Rose, the housekeeper, had been urgently called to stay with him. She tried to distract him with stories, but the boy kept his eyes fixed on the door, as if waiting for Hannah's return. Back in the office, Dr. Marcus slid a document across the desk. "This is a temporary suspension notice, 3 weeks to reassess your professional conduct." Hannah felt her heart tighten, but her voice remained firm. "And what about Ethan? 3 weeks could undo all the progress we've achieved." "The hospital has highly qualified professionals who will take over the case," he replied, his voice cold. "Professionals who follow protocols." It was at that moment that the office door opened. Robert Mitchell entered, followed by Dr. Franklin, and another man Hannah didn't know. "Dr. Marcus," Robert's voice was dangerously calm, "Paul, my lawyer, just informed me of something interesting about the hospital's policies related to alternative treatments." The administrative director adjusted, his glasses visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Mitchell, this is an internal matter." "No," cut in Robert, "this is a matter of life, my son's life, and if you think I'm going to allow bureaucracy and egos to interfere with his progress, you are very mistaken." Hannah observed the scene, with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "Mr. Mitchell, I don't want to cause problem." "You're not causing problems, Hannah," he replied, without taking his eyes off Marcus. "You're saving my son. And this," he took the suspension notice, "from the desk, tearing it in half, is not going to happen." Dr. Franklin cleared his throat, taking a step forward. "If I may, I have a suggestion. We can officially document Hannah's methods, transforming them into a case study. That way, we would be within protocols while still maintaining the treatment that's working." A tense silence filled the room. Dr. Marcus looked at the torn papers on his desk, his face a mask of displeasure. Robert remained firm, his posture making his determination clear. Hannah thought of Ethan, alone in his room, waiting for her. "With all due respect," said Hannah, standing up, While we discuss protocols and policies, there's a boy who needs help. And if you'll excuse me, I promised him we would continue our Bluebird song today." She walked toward the door, stopping only for a moment. "Dr. Marcus, you're invited to observe our sessions whenever you wish. Sometimes, seeing with the heart helps us see beyond the papers." The following weeks brought subtle but significant changes to St. Cross Hospital. Room 304 had transformed into a kind of living case study, with professionals from different areas discreetly observing Hannah's sessions with Ethan. Dr. Franklin personally coordinated the documentation of each progress, however small. On a particularly sunny morning, Hannah arrived carrying something new, a small guitar. "Look, Ethan, Tommy said it's time to expand our musical repertoire." She positioned the instrument carefully, adjusting the strings while softly humming. Ethan, who now showed more expressiveness in his face, observed the guitar with evident curiosity. Tommy, always in his lap, seemed to observe as well. On the wall of the room, a colorful mural displayed the progress of recent weeks, drawings, paintings, and small musical notes scribbled on lined paper. Robert entered the room, but something was different. Instead of the usual impeccable suit, he wore a casual shirt and jeans. In his hands, he carried a bulky brown envelope. "Good morning," he greeted, a discreet smile on his lips. "I brought a surprise." Hannah immediately noticed the change in his appearance. "Mr. Mitchell, you look different today. What do you think, Ethan? Dad looks more like a rock star, doesn't he?" To everyone's surprise, Ethan made a sound that resembled laughter, a sound so precious it made Robert freeze in place, his eyes instantly watering. "Come, sit with us," invited Hannah, indicating a chair nearby. "Tommy was just saying we need more musicians in our band." Robert sat down, still processing the sound of his son's laughter. From the envelope he had brought, he began to take out old photographs. "I found more albums in the attic," he explained, his voice choked. "There are some photos of your mother playing guitar." Hannah gently plucked the strings of the instrument, creating a soft melody that served as background for that moment. Ethan, still holding Tommy, leaned over to see the photographs his father spread on the table. "Look at this one," said Robert, showing an image where Claire, pregnant, played guitar in a flowery garden. "It was the day we decided on your name. Your mother said that Ethan meant strong and that you would strengthen our lives." Hannah observed as Ethan extended his free hand to touch the photograph, his small fingers delicately tracing the outline of his mother's face. It was a gesture so full of meaning that even Dr. Franklin, who discreetly observed from the door, had to clean his glasses, fogged by emotion. "Mr. Mitchell," Hannah called softly, "why don't we learn together? Music has this wonderful power to connect us." Robert hesitated for a moment, but upon seeing Ethan's expectant look, he moved his chair closer. Hannah began to teach the basic chords of the Bluebird song, the one Claire had created. "Like this," she demonstrated, guiding Robert's hands over the strings. "It's like a dance of the fingers. Ethan, would you like to try too?" The boy, for the first time, placed Tommy gently on the table, using both hands to play the guitar. It was a significant moment. He was ready to explore the world beyond the comfort of his cloth friend. Outside the room, Dr. Marcus passed by with his usual clipboard. He paused for a moment, observing the scene through the glass. His face, normally so severe, showed an expression difficult to decipher. "It's impressive, isn't it?" commented Dr. Franklin, who was still nearby. "How music can heal wounds that traditional medicine can't reach." Marcus adjusted his glasses, his posture less rigid than usual. "Perhaps," he began hesitantly, "perhaps I was hasty in my judgment." Inside the room, the music continued. Robert, now more confident with the basic chords, accompanied Hannah as she sang softly. Ethan, seated between them, moved his hands over the strings, creating his own uncoordinated but meaningful melody. "You know," said Hannah between one song and another, "they say that when we play together, our hearts beat to the same rhythm. It's as if music creates an invisible bridge between people." Robert looked at his son, who was now smiling openly while strumming the guitar. He remembered Claire's words about Ethan being strong, and for the first time in a long time, he felt that prophecy was being fulfilled, strengthening not only their lives, but everything around them. The news of Ethan's extraordinary progress began to spread throughout St. Cross Hospital. Other parents of hospitalized children frequently passed by the corridor of room 304, hoping to catch some of the music that now regularly emanated from there. Hannah, noticing the interest, began to leave the door open during some sessions. "Today we have an audience, Ethan," she commented cheerfully one afternoon while arranging the small space they had transformed into a musical area. "Tommy said he loves having more friends to listen to our songs." Ethan, who now alternated between holding Tommy and playing instruments, looked curiously at the door, where some children from other rooms gathered in their wheelchairs and with their IV stands. His eyes, once so distant, now sparkled with genuine interest in the world around him. Robert arrived during the small improvised performance, carrying a folder of documents different from his usual ones. He stopped at the door, observing how his son interacted with the other children through music even without words. "Mr. Mitchell," greeted Hannah, noticing his presence. "You arrived just in time for our concert. Ethan just created a new melody, didn't he?" The boy responded by strumming the guitar, producing a sequence of notes that, although simple, carried a contagious joy. The other children smiled, some clapping to the rhythm. "Hannah," called Robert, his voice laden with contained emotion, "can I talk to you for a moment?" The nurse nodded, excusing herself to her small audience. Dr. Franklin, who was passing through the corridor, offered to stay with the children for a few minutes. In the small hospital garden, Robert and Hannah sat on a bench under a leafy tree. The businessman opened his folder, revealing architectural projects and official documents. "I bought the land next to the hospital," he announced, extending the plans. "I want to build a wing specialized in music therapy and art therapy for children." Hannah took the documents with trembling hands. "Mr. Mitchell, this is extraordinary. And I want you to lead the project," he continued, his voice firm. "I've seen how other children respond to your method. What you did for Ethan is priceless." The nurse looked at the papers in her hands, silent tears streaming down her face. "But, Dr. Marcus—" "It's all been arranged," interrupted Robert, a small smile on his lips. "Actually, it was he who suggested your name for the coordination." Back in Tita Inmates, room 304, Ethan continued his small performance. Dr. Franklin had joined the group, taking from his pocket a harmonica he had carried since his college days. "Look at this," he commented to the children. "I've always been too shy to play this in public, but if Ethan can create his own music, I think I can try too, can't I?" The sound of the harmonica joined the melody of the guitar, creating an imperfect but lively harmony. On the faces of the watching children, smiles replaced expressions of pain and worry. Rose, who had arrived for her daily visit, observed the scene with watery eyes. "Mrs. Clare would be so proud," she whispered, more to herself than to others. In the garden, Hannah was still processing Robert's proposal. "But how will we structure this? We'll need a team, protocols." "I've already thought of that," he replied, taking more documents from the folder. "I want to transform one of my hotels into a children's rehabilitation center, a place where music and art are as important as medications." Hannah felt her heart race with the possibilities. How many other children could be helped? How many families could find hope through music? "Mr. Mitchell," she began, her voice choked, "why are you doing all this?" Robert looked toward the hospital where he could hear the distant music coming from Ethan's room. "Because I learned that sometimes the greatest miracles happen through the simplest things. A cloth doll, a lullaby, a smile." The sound of children's laughter echoed through the garden, coming from the open window of room 304. Hannah and Robert looked at each other, sharing a moment of silent understanding. Music had done more than heal Ethan. It was transforming lives one note at a time. The Mitchell mansion, previously as silent as a mausoleum, began to gain new life. Robert had decided to bring Ethan home some days of the week, transforming one of the rooms into a musical space. Hannah came 3 times a week for therapy sessions, and the sound of instruments and children's laughter once again echoed through the corridors. That particular afternoon, Rose was preparing cookies in the kitchen, the sweet aroma spreading throughout the entire house. She smiled, hearing the notes from the piano that Robert had brought from his mother's old house, a surprise gift for Ethan. "Tommy is excited today," commented Hannah, observing how Ethan alternated between playing the piano and hugging his inseparable cloth friend. "He said he loves the smell of cookies in the air." The boy smiled, his fingers dancing over the piano keys. They were no longer random notes. There was a pattern, a melody emerging from his touch. Robert, who watched from the door, recognized the music. It was a variation of the Bluebird song that Claire used to sing. "This one is special," said Hannah, sitting next to Ethan on the piano bench. "Would you like to teach me how you created it?" To everyone's surprise, Ethan began to hum softly while playing. They weren't words yet, but the sound of his voice, melodious and clear, filled the environment with a palpable emotion. Robert had to support himself against the doorframe. It was the first time he had heard his son's voice in a complete melody. Rose appeared in the hallway, still wearing her kitchen apron, silent tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Mitchell," called Hannah softly, "come join us. Ethan created a special part for you." The businessman approached the piano, noticing how his son moved slightly to make room for him on the bench. It was a silent but significant invitation. Robert sat down, remembering the basic lessons Hannah had given him in recent weeks. "Like this," guided Ethan, surprising everyone by speaking his first word in a long time. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, but perfectly clear. Hannah maintained her professional composure, though her eyes shone with emotion. "So that's right, Ethan. Show your dad where his fingers should go." Robert followed his son's silent instructions, who guided his hands over the keys with surprising patience. Together, they created a simple but deeply moving harmony. Rose returned to the kitchen to hide her emotion, but soon returned with a tray of still warm cookies. "Mrs. Claire always said that music goes well with fresh cookies," she commented, placing the tray on a small table nearby. "You know," said Hannah, while Ethan savored a cookie, "Tommy told me he's very happy to see this house gaining more color and music each day." Robert observed the environment around him. Indeed, the room had transformed. Where once there were only austere furniture and expensive artwork, now there were musical instruments, colorful drawings on the walls, and a vibrant energy that reminded him of the times when Claire filled the house with life. "Hannah," he called, his voice laden with contained emotion, "we need to talk about the rehabilitation center project." The nurse nodded, perceiving the seriousness in his tone. Ethan continued at the piano, now creating a new melody, completely absorbed in his music. "I've been thinking," continued Robert, "I want it to be more than a medical center. I want to create a place where families can stay together during treatment, like a second home." Hannah felt her heart race with the possibilities. "Like a welcoming space?" "Exactly," he replied, his eyes fixed on Ethan. "I want rooms where parents can stay with their children, spaces for music and art, therapeutic gardens. A place where healing happens not only through medicine, but through love and art." Rose, who was still nearby, added timidly, "Like Mrs. Claire always wanted to do with that property near the lake." Robert turned abruptly. "What do you mean, Rose?" The housekeeper adjusted her apron, suddenly appearing nervous. "Mrs. Claire. She had drawn projects. I found them among her things, kept them in a folder. She dreamed of creating a place like that, especially for children." Hannah observed as Robert closed his eyes, a solitary tear streaming down his face. Once again, Claire was guiding their steps, even after so much time. Rose went up to the mansion's attic, her hands trembling slightly as she searched among old boxes and trunks. Hannah and Robert followed her, while Ethan continued at the piano downstairs, his soft music echoing through the house. "Here!" exclaimed the housekeeper, removing a faded blue folder from inside a wooden trunk. "Mrs. Claire kept everything in this folder." Robert took the object with reverence, as if holding something precious. Upon opening it, dozens of drawings and notes fell onto a nearby table. They were detailed projects for a children's recovery center. each page carefully elaborated with Claire's delicate handwriting. "She called it Butterfly House," explained Rose, her voice choked. "She said it would be a place where injured children would learn to fly again." Hannah examined the drawings, amazed by Claire's vision. There were sketches of therapeutic gardens, music rooms, spaces for art, and a central area in the shape of a butterfly with two large wings embracing an artificial lake. "She thought of everything," murmured Robert, turning the pages. "Even an open-air amphitheater for performances." A different sound reached them. Ethan had begun to sing real words, albeit soft ones, accompanying his melody at the piano. The three adults looked at each other, paralyzed by the emotion of the moment. "It's her song," whispered Rose. "The Bluebird song." They descended the stairs silently, not wanting to interrupt that precious moment. Ethan was completely absorbed in his music, his small fingers dancing over the keys with growing confidence. Tommy rested beside him on the piano bench, like an attentive audience. "Fly, little bluebird," he sang softly. "Take my music to the sky." Robert leaned against the wall, his legs weakening. Hannah instinctively held his arm, offering silent support. Rose covered her face with her hands, tears streaming between her fingers. "Daddy," called Ethan, turning to the door. "This was Mum's song, wasn't it?" Robert crossed the room in large strides, kneeling beside the piano. "Yes, son. It was the special song she made for you." Ethan smiled, a full and luminous smile that transformed his entire face. "She's here, you know. I feel her when I play." Hannah observed the scene with an overflowing heart. In her hands, she still held Claire's projects, the Butterfly House, that now more than ever needed to become reality. "Mr. Mitchell," she called softly, "I think we found the name for our rehabilitation center." Robert nodded, without taking his eyes off his son. "Butterfly House, it's perfect." Ethan began to play again, this time a new melody, something that seemed to combine elements of the Bluebird song with his own notes, creating something entirely new and deeply moving. "You know what Tommy told me," commented Hannah, sitting in a nearby armchair, "that sometimes the dreams of those we love continue to live through us, like a song that never really ends." Robert stood up, taking Claire's projects. His eyes scanned the drawings once more, now with a new understanding. It wasn't just a rehabilitation center they were planning. It was the continuation of a symphony of love that Claire had begun years ago. "Hannah," he said, his voice firm despite the emotion, "tomorrow we'll begin transforming these drawings into reality. Every detail, exactly as she imagined." Ethan stopped playing for a moment, turning to them. "Can I help? I want to make music for all the butterflies that will live there." Hannah smiled, exchanging a significant look with Robert. "Of course you can, Ethan. In fact, I think you've already begun. You're creating the perfect soundtrack for your mother's dream." The autumn painted the sky in golden hues when construction on Butterfly House began, the property near the lake, which Claire had chosen years ago, transformed day by day. Robert personally supervised every detail, always with the original drawings in hand, ensuring that each line of his wife's project was respected. Hannah had reduced her hours at the hospital to dedicate herself to developing the therapeutic program for the new center. Her afternoons were now divided between sessions with Ethan, who continued to progress impressively, and meetings with a multidisciplinary team that would help bring Claire's dream to life. "Look, Ethan," she exclaimed on a particularly beautiful afternoon as they observed the construction through the window of Robert's car. "The walls of the east wing are already beginning to form the butterfly's wings." The boy, seated in his special chair and holding faithful Tommy, pressed his face against the car window, his eyes shining with excitement. "Dad, can we go closer?" Robert exchanged a look with Hannah through the rearview mirror. In recent weeks, Ethan had begun to form complete sentences, each word a small victory that warmed their hearts. "Of course we can," he replied, maneuvering the car toward the construction area. "Actually, I have a surprise for both of you." They parked near the main construction site, where a white tent had been set up. Under it, a detailed model of Butterfly House rested on a table, surrounded by various professionals engaged in animated Conversation. Mr. Mitchell. Dr. Franklin waved, approaching the group. You arrived just in time. We were just discussing the music therapy room project. Ethan, with Hannah's help, moved in his chair to the model, his eyes scanning each detail with fascination. Look, Tommy, he whispered to the doll. It's going to be the most beautiful place in the world. Hannah noticed something special in the model, small colored dots scattered across the ceiling of various rooms. Are they special lights? She asked, curious. Robert smiled, his eyes shining with contained emotion. Claire had this idea. She wanted to create a lighting system that would change color according to the music being played. Each room will have its own musical sky. Like a sound aurora borealis, exclaimed Ethan, surprising everyone with his poetic analogy. Doctor, Franklin adjusted his glasses, visibly moved. You know, Ethan, it was you who inspired many doctors at the hospital to believe in different forms of healing. Now we have a waiting list of professionals wanting to be part of this project. Hannah observed as Ethan extended his hand to touch the model, his fingers delicately tracing the outline of the building's wings. Dad, he called, his voice clear and decisive. Can I make a request? Robert knelt beside his son's chair. Of course, son, what do you want? I want to learn to walk again, said Ethan, his eyes fixed on the model. I want to be able to walk through all the places in Butterfly House when it's ready. An emotional silence fell over the group. Hannah felt her hands tremble slightly. It was the first time Ethan had verbally expressed the desire to walk again. Son, Robert breathed deeply, controlling the emotion. We're going to make that happen. I promise. Dr. Franklin cleared his throat, discreetly cleaning his fogged glasses. Actually, we're already in contact with motor rehabilitation specialists, with the right combination of therapies. And music, interrupted Ethan, excited. Hannah said music helps the body remember how to move. Hannah smiled, remembering the research she had studied about music therapy and motor rehabilitation. Exactly, Ethan. And you know what? I think Tommy will love being your dance partner when you're ready. Robert observed the interaction, amazed by his son's transformation. The boy who a few months ago barely reacted to the outside world now talked about dancing, about dreams, about the future. Mr. Mitchell, called one of the architects, approaching. With a folder of documents, we need your approval for the sensory garden project. Ah, this is special, exclaimed Hannah, recognizing the drawings. Claire planned every detail, thinking about the different sensory needs of children. Ethan leaned over to see the drawings, still holding Tommy to his chest. Will there be lavender? He asked, remembering the scent that Rose kept alive in the mansion. Yes, son, replied Robert, his voice choked. Your mother planned an entire bed just with lavender. She said it was the scent of hope. Winter arrived, but the cold didn't diminish the pace of construction at Butterfly House. Inside the Mitchell mansion, equally important transformations were happening. The music room, previously improvised, had become a complete therapeutic space with special equipment for motor rehabilitation. Very good, Ethan, encouraged Hannah, while the boy supported himself on the newly installed parallel bars. Remember, how a special song for exercises. Ethan smiled, concentrating on moving his legs. Tommy was strategically positioned at the end of the bars like a goal to be reached. The brave little bird song, he replied, beginning to softly hum. Robert, who had begun to work more from home to accompany his son's rehabilitation, observed from the door, his laptop forgotten on a nearby table. Each small movement of Ethan's was a victory that made his heart race. Look at that, commented Hannah, noticing how the boy's legs responded better when he sang, It seems your muscles also like music. Dr. Franklin, who regularly came to monitor Ethan's progress, made notes on his clipboard. It's fascinating, he murmured, how the rhythm of music helps with motor coordination. Ethan continued his exercise, each step small but determined. His hands gripped the bars tightly, but his face showed no pain, only concentration and a serene joy that seemed to illuminate the entire environment. Dad, he called, without taking his eyes off his goal, tell that story again? About the first time Mom saw you dancing? Robert laughed, approaching the bars. Ah, that story. I was at a charity event, trying to impress some investors with my awkward dance steps. Your mother was the pianist hired for the event. And did she laugh at your dancing? Asked Ethan, taking another careful step. No, son. She came down from the stage, still playing a portable keyboard, and taught me the right steps. She said, "Every song has its own dance. We just need to listen with our hearts." Hannah observed as Ethan reached the halfway point of the bars, his greatest distance yet. "That's right, dear. You're listening with your heart, just like your mother taught." It was at that moment that something extraordinary happened. Ethan, concentrating on the song he was humming, released one hand from the bars. For a brief instant, he was supported only by one bar and his own legs. "Hannah," he called, his voice trembling with excitement. "I'm doing it!" Robert instinctively moved forward, ready to support his son, but Hannah signaled for him to wait. "Let him feel this moment," she whispered. Ethan maintained his balance for a few precious seconds before returning to hold the bar with both hands. His face shone with pride and accomplishment. "Son," Robert's voice was choked, "you're amazing." Dr. Franklin made frantic notes on his clipboard. "This is extraordinary. The combination of music with physical therapy is producing results beyond our expectations." Hannah approached Ethan, offering water and a moment of rest. "You know what Tommy told me?" she commented with a conspiratorial smile, "that he can hardly wait to dance with you at the inauguration of Butterfly House." The boy's eyes sparkled. "I will dance at the inauguration, I promise." Robert sat beside his son, affectionately running his hand through his hair. "Claire always said you had music in your veins. I think she was right, as always." "Mr. Mitchell," called Hannah softly, "I think it's time to show Ethan the surprise we prepared." Robert nodded, getting up to fetch something from an adjacent room. He returned carrying a beautifully decorated box with hand-painted butterflies. "These are your first new orthoses," he explained, opening the box to reveal a pair of leg supports, painted with a pattern of butterfly wings in blue tones. "Customized, as you requested." Ethan touched the supports with reverence. "They're beautiful. They look like real wings." Hannah helped him try on the orthoses, carefully adjusting each buckle. "Now you have your own wings, just like the butterflies in the house your mother dreamed of." "And you know what else?" added Robert, his voice laden with emotion. "We found more of your mother's drawings. She had designed a special stage in the garden near the lake. She said it would be the perfect place for performances at sunset." Spring arrived, bringing vibrant colors to the garden of Butterfly House. The lavender planted months before began to bloom, creating a purple carpet that swayed gently with the breeze. The inauguration was scheduled for a month away, and the final details were being completed with meticulous dedication. Hannah arrived early that morning at the Mitchell mansion, carrying a special surprise in her bag. She found Ethan already in the music room, practicing with his new orthoses while Robert observed him proud. "Good morning, family," she greeted, smiling to see the boy's evident progress. Ethan could now take several steps in succession, supporting himself only slightly on the bars. "I brought something special today." Ethan, who had just reached Tommy at the end of the bars, turned curiously. "What is it?" Hannah took from her bag a small violin, perfectly suited for a child's size. "Remember when you said you wanted to play something you could carry while walking? Well, I thought perhaps—" The boy's eyes sparkled with excitement. "A violin, just like Mom played in the garden. Photos." Robert approached, visibly moved. "How did you know?" "Rose showed me more photographs," explained Hannah softly. "I saw how Ethan always spent more time looking at the photos where Claire played violin in the garden." Ethan, still supported, on the bar with one hand, extended the other to touch the instrument. "Can I try?" "Of course," replied Hannah, approaching with the violin. "Actually, I have a theory. I think playing violin will help even more with your motor coordination. It's like a dance between the arms and legs." Robert observed as Hannah helped Ethan position the violin correctly. The boy, who already demonstrated a natural talent for music, held the instrument with surprising familiarity. "It seems he already knows it," commented Robert, his voice choked. "Claire used to play for him when he was still in her womb." Hannah smiled, gently adjusting Ethan's posture. "The body has an extraordinary memory. Sometimes our cells remember melodies we didn't even know we knew." With care and patience, Hannah began to teach the first movements of the bow on the strings. Ethan, concentrated, produced the first sounds out of tune but full of promise. "Dad," he called, excited, "can you hear it? I'm making music while standing." Indeed, Ethan had momentarily forgotten his limitation, too focused on the new instrument, to notice that he was maintaining his balance virtually on his own. Robert exchanged a significant look with Hannah. This was exactly what she had planned. Music wasn't just therapy, it was a bridge to even greater recoveries. "Mr. Mitchell," called Hannah softly, "I think it's time to show Ethan the other gift." Robert nodded, briefly leaving the room. He returned carrying an old violin case, beautifully preserved. "Son," he said, opening the case with reverent care, "this was your mother's violin. She left a letter with it, saying that one day it would be yours." Ethan lowered his small violin, approaching with careful steps the case. Inside, besides the impeccably preserved instrument, there was a yellowed envelope with his name written, in Claire's delicate handwriting. "Would you like me to read it to you?" offered Robert. Ethan shook his head, determined. "No, I want to read it myself, but first..." He turned to Hannah, his eyes shining with purpose. "I want to learn the Bluebird song on the violin. I want to play at the inauguration of Butterfly House." Hannah felt her eyes water. "Are you sure? We only have a month." "I am," affirmed Ethan with conviction, "and I want to make a surprise. I want it to be a gift for Dad. And for Mom." Robert had to sit down, overwhelmed by emotion. Ethan continued, his voice gaining strength. "Hannah, can you teach me? Please? I promise to practice every day." "Of course I can," she replied, discreetly wiping away a tear. "Actually, I think your mother already began that teaching a long time ago." Ethan smiled, turning his attention back to the small violin. With a determination that clearly resembled Claire, he positioned the instrument and began to try the first chords of the song that had accompanied his entire story. Rose, who discreetly observed from the door, whispered something that sounded like a prayer. "Music is bringing everyone back home." And it truly was. In the music room of the Mitchell mansion, as a boy learned to take his first steps in the dance between music and movement, Claire's dreams gained wings again, transforming into a symphony of new beginnings. The weeks leading up to the inauguration of Butterfly House were intense. Ethan dedicated himself with extraordinary determination to rehearsals with the violin, dividing his time between music and rehabilitation exercises. Hannah came twice a day, adjusting her class schedules at the hospital to give more attention to her young student's special project. "One more time," Ethan would ask, even when his arms already showed fatigue. Tommy, his eternal companion, now watched the rehearsals sitting in a special little chair that Rose had made, decorated with small embroidered butterflies. On a particularly productive afternoon, while Ethan practiced an especially challenging part of the song, Hannah noticed something different in his posture. "Ethan," she called softly, "did you notice you've been standing for almost an hour without support?" The boy stopped playing, surprised by the realization. Indeed, he was so focused on the music that he had completely forgotten his limitations. Robert, who was working on his notebook in a corner of the room, immediately looked up. "It's true, son." "Don't say it," interrupted Ethan, a mischievous smile on his lips. "If you say it, I'll remember and then I'll get nervous. Just let me continue playing." Hannah exchanged an emotional look with Robert. This was exactly what she had theorized. Music was creating new neural pathways, helping Ethan's body rediscover movements that seemed lost. "You know," she commented as Ethan resumed playing, "your mother wrote some articles about music therapy. Rose found them among her papers. She believed that music had the power to reconnect the body with dormant memories." Ethan stopped, again his eyes shining with interest. "Really, she wrote about that?" Robert closed his notebook, approaching. "Yes, son, your mother was trained in music, but she was studying music therapy when..." His voice faltered for a moment. "When she left us. That's why the Butterfly House project had so many music rooms," exclaimed Ethan, the pieces fitting together in his young but perceptive mind. "She already knew." Hannah smiled, delicately adjusting the position of the bow in Ethan's hands. "Your mother was a visionary, and you know what? I think she would be very proud to see how you're turning her theory into reality." Ethan repositioned the violin, but before starting again, he asked, "Hannah, do you think on Inauguration Day I'll be able to play and walk at the same time?" "I'm sure you will," she replied with conviction. "In fact, you're already doing that right now." The boy looked at his feet, realizing he had taken several steps while they were talking without any support. His eyes filled with tears of joy. "Dad," he called, his voice trembling slightly, "I think I'm ready to read Mom's letter." Robert immediately stood up, going to fetch the envelope that remained kept in the old violin case. Ethan sat on the piano bench, still holding his own violin, while his father handed him the letter with trembling hands. Hannah made a motion to leave to give the family privacy, but Ethan called her back. "Stay, please. You're part of this story. Now too." With careful fingers, Ethan opened the envelope. Claire's delicate handwriting filled 2 pages with words that seemed to dance on the paper. "My little blue bird," he began to read aloud, his voice clear and firm. "If you're reading this letter, it means that music has found its way back to your heart." Robert sat beside his son, wrapping his shoulders with a protective arm. Hannah remained standing near Tommy, feeling they were about to witness another crucial moment in that extraordinary journey of healing and love. The silence in the music room was almost palpable as Ethan continued to read his mother's letter, his young voice carrying each word with emotion. "My little bluebird, if you're reading this letter, it means that music has found its way back to your heart. I always knew this would happen. Music is in your DNA, in the deepest memories of your being. From the time you were in my womb, you responded to each melody with small dance movements as if you already knew you were born to fly. This violin I leave for you has a special history. It was with it that I played for your father for the first time, at a charity event, where he was awkwardly trying to impress some investors with his dance steps. He was always better with numbers than with rhythm, but that night, something magical happened. Music connected us in a way that words never could. Ethan, my love, if you're holding this instrument now, you've probably already discovered the transformative power of music. It's not just about notes and melodies, it's about healing, connection, rebirth. In my studies on music therapy, I learned that our body holds musical memories that can awaken even in the most difficult moments. Along with this letter, I also leave my dreams for Butterfly House. It may seem like just an architectural project, but it's much more than that. It's a place where other children like you will discover that limitations are just starting points for new flights. Ask your father to tell you about the blue butterflies that appeared in the garden the day we discovered you were on the way. He probably hasn't mentioned this before. Your father was always more reserved with his emotions, but that day he cried with joy seeing how the butterflies danced in the air, as if celebrating your arrival. My son, if life ever brings challenges that seem impossible to overcome, remember, you have music in your veins and wings in your heart. Nothing can stop a bluebird from flying when he discovers his own song. Ethan paused, his hands trembling slightly. Robert, beside him, had silent tears streaming down his face. Hannah remained quiet, respecting the intensity of the moment. "There's more," whispered Ethan, turning the page. "And if one day you find someone special, someone who can see beyond appearances and touch your soul with the same gentleness with which music touches our hearts, be grateful. These people are disguised angels, sent to remind us that love has many forms of manifestation." Robert, my love, because I know you'll be by Ethan's side when he reads this letter, allow yourself to fly too. Love is like music. It's always around us, just waiting for us to open our hearts to hear it again. And to whoever is helping my little bird rediscover his wings, thank you. Thank you for seeing what I always knew, that inside this boy there's an entire symphony waiting to be played. With all my eternal love, Mom P.S. Ethan, don't let your father give up dancing. He may not have rhythm, but he has the most musical heart I've ever known. Ethan lowered the letter, her last words echoing in the room now filled with emotion. Robert hugged him tightly, years of repressed feelings finally finding release. Hannah discreetly wiped her own tears, realizing that Claire had somehow foreseen everything, the need for healing through music, the importance of keeping the heart Open to new connections. Dad, Ethan called softly, you never told me about the blue butterflies. Robert took a deep breath, composing himself. It was one of the most special days of my life. Your mother was in the garden playing this same violin when a group of blue butterflies appeared out of nowhere. They began to fly in circles around her as if dancing. It was at that moment she told me you were on the way. Ethan smiled, looking at his own violin. Is that why she wrote the Bluebird song? Yes, replied Robert. She said you were our little blue miracle, our most beautiful. Music. Hannah observed as Ethan stood up, determined, positioning the violin. Without any support, he began to play the first chords of the Bluebird song. His feet moved naturally, as if dancing with the melody. Look, Dad, he exclaimed, between one note and another. I'm flying. There was only 1 week left until the inauguration of Butterfly House. The place was practically ready, with each detail meticulously executed according to Claire's drawings. The lavender garden bloomed exuberantly, creating a purple carpet that framed the butterfly-shaped building. Hannah had organized a general rehearsal in the open-air auditorium near the lake. Ethan, wearing a blue shirt specially chosen for the occasion, practiced his steps while holding the violin, now much more confident in his movements. Remember what we agreed? Asked Hannah, adjusting the small lapel microphone that Ethan would wear during the presentation. You start at the beginning of the stone path, and I play while walking to the stage, he completed, excited. And when I get there, I do the surprise. Robert, who was supervising the final adjustments to the lighting system, couldn't help but smile. The surprise that Ethan had prepared was a special arrangement of the Bluebird song, incorporating elements of other songs that Claire used to play. Rose arrived carrying a mysterious box. Ethan, dear, I brought something special for you to try on. Inside the box was a small royal blue suit, with details resembling butterfly wings on the shoulders. It was his size when he was your age, she explained, looking at Robert. Mrs. Claire kept it with such care. Ethan touched the fabric with reverence. Can I wear it on Inauguration Day? Of course you can, son, replied Robert, his voice choked. Your mother would love to see you wearing it. The rehearsal began. Ethan positioned himself at the beginning of the stone path. Tommy carefully placed in a chair in the front row. The late afternoon light created a magical setting, reflecting on the waters of the lake. At the first chords of the violin, something extraordinary happened. A group of blue butterflies, perhaps attracted by the lavender garden, began to fly around the area. Hannah held her breath, remembering the story Robert had told. Ethan began his walk, playing with a skill that moved everyone. His steps were firm, secure, as if he had never faced difficulties walking. The music flowed naturally, echoing through the open space. Dr. Franklin, who had discreetly arrived with Dr. Marcus to observe the rehearsal, whispered, "It's clinically impossible. His recovery defies all statistics." Marcus, who in recent months had become one of the project's greatest advocates, simply replied, "Some cures go beyond the science we know." When Ethan reached the stage, his surprise was revealed. The music transformed into a medley that included excerpts from Für Elise, the first song Claire taught Robert, and ended with an especially moving version of the Bluebird song. Robert couldn't contain his tears. Hannah approached him, silently offering her support. The butterflies continued their aerial dance, as if participating in the performance. "Hannah," called Ethan after finishing, his eyes shining with joy. "Do you think Mom sent the butterflies?" She smiled, climbing onto the stage to hug him. "I'm sure she did, dear. She's here dancing with each note you play." Robert joined them on stage, hugging his son tightly. "Son, you are extraordinary. Your mother, she always knew what you would be capable of." Ethan smiled, looking at Tommy in the front row. "It wasn't just me, Dad. It was the music. It was Hannah. It was you. It was everyone together. Mom said in the letter, 'Love is like music. It's always around us.'" The blue butterflies continued their graceful flight over the lake, their wings reflecting the last rays of the sun. In the sky, rosy clouds formed patterns, reminiscent of musical staves, as if the universe itself was preparing for the great celebration that was to come. The day of Butterfly House's inauguration dawned with an extraordinarily blue sky. The building, with its majestic wings embracing the lake, seemed ready to take flight. Hundreds of people arrived, filling the environment with an energy of expectation and hope. In the room specially prepared for the artists, Ethan adjusted, the small royal blue suit that had belonged to his father. Hannah, wearing a dress the color of the garden's lavender, helped him with his bow tie. "Nervous?" she asked, noticing how the boy's fingers lightly drummed against the violin. "A little bit," admitted Ethan, looking at himself in the mirror. "But Tommy said it's normal to have butterflies in your stomach on special days." Robert entered the room, also wearing a blue suit that matched his son's. His eyes shone with pride and contained emotion. "Son, I brought something for you." In his hands was a small velvet box. Inside, a delicate brooch in the shape of a butterfly, studded with small sapphires. "It was your mother's," he explained, his voice choked. "She wore it during our first performance together." Hannah helped pin the brooch to Ethan's lapel, who touched the jewel with reverence. "Now she'll be even closer during the performance," he whispered. Outside, the buzz increased. Dr. Franklin entered the room hurriedly. "Everything's ready. The press has arrived. The families of the first children who will be attended are also. And the musical skylights?" asked Ethan, referring to the special lighting system his mother had designed. "Working perfectly," assured the doctor. "It's going to be magnificent." Rose appeared carrying Tommy, now wearing a small suit she had specially sewn for the occasion. "Your friend is ready for the big moment," she smiled, placing the doll in Ethan's arms. "Hannah," called Ethan softly, "can you keep Tommy during the presentation? He's never seen the Bluebird song from the audience." The nurse felt her eyes water. It was the first time Ethan entrusted his precious friend to someone. "It will be an honor, dear. I'm sure Tommy will love his special perspective of the show." Robert checked his watch. "It's time, son. Shall we?" Ethan nodded, but before leaving, he asked for a moment. He went to the window from where he could see the lavender garden gently swaying with the breeze. "Mum," he whispered, "thank you for never letting the music stop." The group followed through the corridors of Butterfly House, passing rooms that would soon be filled with children discovering their own healing melodies. The walls, painted in soft tones, displayed inspiring phrases written in Claire's calligraphy, taken from her diaries and notes. Upon reaching the starting point of the stone path, where Ethan would begin his presentation, a surprise awaited. To them, Dr. Marcus was there, holding a bouquet of blue flowers. "Ethan," he said, kneeling to be at the boy's height, "you taught me that sometimes we need to let go of our certainties to find true miracles. These flowers are for you." Ethan accepted the bouquet with a radiant smile. "Thank you, Doctor. Would you like to sit in the front row? It's the best place to see the butterflies dance." The doctor, visibly moved, simply nodded before heading to his seat. Hannah hugged Ethan one last time before going to her place in the audience, taking Tommy with her. Robert also prepared to go, but his son stopped him. "Dad," called Ethan, his eyes shining with wisdom beyond his years, "Mom was right about you having the most musical heart in the world. I can hear it, you know, every time you smile." Robert hugged his son tightly, allowing himself a moment of complete vulnerability. When they separated, both had tears in their eyes, but also radiant smiles. The first notes of the orchestra began to sound, announcing the beginning of the ceremony. Ethan positioned himself, violin in hand, ready for his triumphant entrance. In the sky, as a divine gift, a group of blue butterflies began to circle over the lake, their wings shimmering under the morning sunlight. The moment had arrived. At the first chords of the orchestra, Ethan began his walk along the stone path, his violin producing the crystalline notes of the Bluebird song. Each step was firm, confident, as if he were floating over the marble floor. In the front row, Hannah gently held Tommy, her silent tears mixing with her radiant smile. Robert, seated beside her, observed his son with an expression of pure love and admiration. Rose, Dr. Franklin, and Dr. Marcus completed the row, each of them a fundamental part of the extraordinary. journey that had brought them there. As Ethan approached the stage, the special lights of the musical sky began to dance, creating patterns that accompanied each note. Blues, golds, and silvers intertwined in the air, realizing the dream Claire had drawn so many years before. The audience watched in reverent silence, hypnotized by the vision of the small musician who not only played but told a story of overcoming through each movement. The blue butterflies continued their aerial dance as if they were part of the presentation. Upon reaching the stage, Ethan began his special surprise, the medley he had prepared. The notes of Fur-Elise brought tears to Robert's eyes, reminding him of the moment he fell in love with Claire. The transition to the Bluebird song was as smooth as a sigh, laden with emotion and meaning. It was then that something magical happened. While playing, Ethan began to move across the stage with a natural grace, his feet gliding as if dancing with the wind. There were no more traces of the child who once lost the ability to walk. In his place was a full artist, free, flying with his own wings. Hannah pressed Tommy against her chest, feeling as if her heart might explode with joy. Robert took her hand, a silent gesture of gratitude and affection that said more than 1,000 words could express. The last notes of the music floated in the air like small sonic stars. Ethan lowered the violin and, for the first time since the beginning of the presentation, looked directly at the audience. His eyes shone with an inner light that illuminated his entire face. "This song," he said into the microphone, his voice clear and confident, "is for all the butterflies who will learn to fly here. It's for my father, who never gave up on me. For Hannah, who helped me find my wings, and especially," he paused, looking at the sky where the butterflies still danced, "for my mother, who planted music in our hearts and taught us that love is the strongest melody that exists." The audience erupted in emotional applause. Robert climbed onto the stage, hugging his son tightly. Hannah joined them, bringing Tommy. In seconds, a collective hug formed that included Rose, Dr. Franklin, Dr. Marcus, and several members of the team that had made that dream possible. "Look, Dad," exclaimed Ethan suddenly, pointing to the lake. The sun, reflecting on the water, created a spectacle of light that seemed to make the entire butterfly house building shimmer in blue and gold tones. "Your mother is applauding too," whispered Robert, kissing his son's forehead. Hannah observed as Ethan smiled, a smile so radiant and pure that it seemed to illuminate the entire environment. The butterfly brooch on his lapel sparkled under the lights of the musical sky, as if it had a life of its own. "You know," said Ethan, still in his father's embrace, "I think I understood what Mom meant in the letter. No matter what happens, we can always fly. We just need to find our own music." The blue butterflies made one last circular flight over the lake before disappearing.